Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. If you've subscribed for more stories, enjoy the ride now. The rain hammered against David Park's apartment window with the relentless persistence of a debt collector, creating rivulets that distorted the Seattle skyline into abstract watercolors. He sat hunched over his laptop, nursing his third cup of coffee and trying to make sense of a particularly convoluted city council corruption story, when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through his concentration like a knife through his perpetually fragile focus. Seriously? David muttered, glancing at the clock that read 9:47 p.m. Who visits this late on a Tuesday? He saved his work with the paranoid efficiency of someone who'd lost too many articles to unexpected power outages and shuffled toward the door in his fuzzy slippers, expecting to find either a lost delivery driver or Mrs. Chen from 3B complaining about his late-night typing again. He opened the door and felt the world tilt sideways. Zara stood in the hallway, exactly as beautiful and impossible as the day she'd vanished from his life 5 years ago. Her silver-white hair cascaded over her shoulders like liquid moonlight, and those crimson eyes, the distinctive mark of the sanguinari, fixed on his face with an intensity that made his knees forget how to support his weight. She wore a long black coat that seemed to absorb the fluorescent hallway lighting, and raindrops clung to her pale skin like diamonds. Beside her, partially hidden behind the folds of Zara's coat, stood a small girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child had David's dark hair, unruly and sticking up in several directions despite obvious attempts to tame it, but her eyes were unmistakably sanguinary crimson. She clutched a worn stuffed dragon that had seen better decades and peered up at David with the kind of solemn intelligence that belonged on much older faces. "Please understand," Zara said, her voice carrying the same musical cadence that had haunted his dreams for 5 years. "I know this is unexpected." David's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. "Unexpected? Zara, you disappeared. You left me a note that said, 'I have to go, don't look for me,' and vanished for 5 years. Unexpected doesn't begin to cover this." "Papa?" the little girl asked, tugging on Zara's coat. "Is this my papa?" The word hit David like a physical blow. Papa. He stared at the child, at Lydia. He somehow knew her name was Lydia, and saw himself in the shape of her nose, the stubborn cowlick in her hair, the way she shifted her weight from foot to foot when nervous. But those eyes, those impossible crimson eyes, marked her as something far more complex than either fully human or fully sanguinary. "Yes, little star," Zara replied softly, her hand resting protectively on the girl's shoulder. "This is your papa." David felt his legs give out slightly, and he gripped the doorframe for support. How old is she?" "4 years, 3 months, and 6 days, Zara answered with the precision of someone who had counted every moment. "She was conceived just before I left." The hallway seemed to spin around David as math and memory collided in his brain. 5 years ago, Zara had been acting strangely for weeks before her disappearance, distant, nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder as if expecting attack. Their last night together had been passionate and desperate, filled with whispered words of love and promises neither of them understood they couldn't keep. "You were pregnant when you left," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know," Zara replied, though her tone suggested this wasn't entirely true. "Not for certain. But I suspected, and I couldn't risk. I couldn't let them find you." "Find her?" "Them?" Zara glanced nervously down the hallway, her enhanced senses clearly detecting something David couldn't perceive. "It's not safe to discuss this here. May we come in? Please." David looked at his wife, ex-wife. Missing wife. The legal implications of supernatural abandonment had never been covered in any relationship advice column he'd read, and at the daughter he'd never known existed. Lydia was studying him with the intense focus of someone memorizing details, her small hand never releasing its grip on the stuffed dragon. "What's your dragon's name?" David asked, crouching down to the child's eye level. Lydia's serious expression softened slightly. "Mr. Flame. He's very old and has seen many worlds. Many worlds. Mama showed me the star gardens and the crystal cities and the places where time moves like honey, Lydia explained matter-of-factly, as if interdimensional travel was as normal as grocery shopping. But she said Earth is special because it's where Papa lives. David felt something crack open in his chest, a combination of joy, loss, and overwhelming bewilderment that threatened to reduce him to tears right there in the hallway. He looked up at Zara, who was watching their interaction with an expression of desperate hope tempered by obvious fear. "We can't stay long," Zara said quietly. "They're close now. Too close. But she needed to meet you. And I needed to explain." "Explain what?" "Why you left. Why you disappeared without a word. Why I spent 2 years wondering if you were dead and 3 more trying to convince myself I didn't care anymore." The words came out harsher than David intended, but 5 years of suppressed pain and confusion demanded expression. "All of that," Zara replied, her crimson eyes glistening with what might have been tears. "And why we might have to disappear again if you can't forgive me." Lydia looked between her parents with growing concern, her small face creased with worry that seemed far too mature for her age. "Are you angry with Mama, Papa? She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. She says she misses someone who smells like coffee and books and home." The observation hit David harder than any of Zara's explanations could have. He looked at his wife, because despite everything, she was still his wife in every way that mattered, and saw the same exhaustion and longing he'd been carrying for 5 years. "I'm not angry," David said, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I'm confused and hurt and I have about 8,000 questions, but I'm not angry." He stood up and stepped aside. "Come in. Both of you. We need to talk." Zara's relief was visible, her shoulders sagging as tension she'd been carrying for years finally began to ease. "Thank you." They entered David's apartment, which suddenly seemed embarrassingly small and bachelor-messy compared to the otherworldly grace of his unexpected visitors. Lydia immediately began exploring with the fearless curiosity of a child who had apparently seen crystal cities and star gardens, though she moved with a careful precision that suggested superhuman strength barely contained in a tiny body. "Coffee?" David offered automatically, then caught himself. "Right. You don't drink coffee anymore. Or eat food. Or..." He trailed off, realizing how little he actually knew about sanguinary dietary requirements. "I can consume small amounts of human food now," Zara said softly. "The bonding with you changed my physiology in unexpected ways. Coffee would be nice." As David busied himself with the familiar ritual of brewing coffee, he watched Lydia examine his bookshelf with intense interest. She pulled out a worn copy of Contact by Carl Sagan and flipped through the pages with surprising reverence. "She can read?" David asked. "Several languages," Zara replied with obvious pride. "Sanguinary children develop rapidly, and hybrid children even more so. She understands concepts that would challenge most adult humans." "Great," David muttered. "My 4-year-old daughter is smarter than me. That's not intimidating at all." Lydia giggled, the first truly childlike sound she'd made since arriving. "Papa's funny, Mama. You were right. You told her about me?" "Every day," Zara admitted. "Stories about your work, your kindness, your terrible jokes about alien conspiracy theories that turned out to be embarrassingly accurate." David handed Zara a mug of coffee and watched her inhale the steam with an expression of pure bliss. "So," he said, settling into his armchair while Lydia continued her literary exploration, "why don't you start with the part where you explain why you left me to raise our interdimensional vampire daughter alone for 5 years?" "Because I wasn't alone, Papa," Lydia interrupted, looking up from the book with that unsettling adult intelligence. "Mama had Uncle Dante and Aunt Serafina and the rebellion fighters who helped us hide from the bad vampires who want to hurt hybrids like me." David blinked. "Rebellion fighters?" Zara shot Lydia a look that was part exasperation, part affection. You weren't supposed to mention the rebellion until I explained the political situation. Oops, Lydia said, not looking particularly sorry. But Papa should know that Mama is a hero who saved lots of people, not just us. Political situation? David repeated weakly. Rebellion? Bad vampires? Zara, what exactly did you get us into? Before Zara could answer, her entire body went rigid, her enhanced senses clearly detecting something that made her crimson eyes blaze with alarm. Lydia immediately moved to her mother's side, her childish exploration forgotten as she too seemed to sense approaching danger. They found us, Zara whispered, her voice carrying the deadly calm of a predator preparing for battle. We need to leave. Now. Wait, what do you mean they found us? David asked, but Zara was already moving with inhuman speed, checking the apartment's windows and exits with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to running for her life. The Crimson Covenant, Zara explained tersely, her enhanced hearing apparently picking up threats David couldn't detect. Sanguinary traditionalists who believe our kind should remain separate from all other species. They view hybrid children as abominations and humans who bond with sanguinary as. She paused, glancing at Lydia. Let's just say they're not fond of interspecies relationships. Mama, Lydia said calmly, still clutching Mr. Flame, the scary-smelling people are in the building now. 3rd floor, coming up the stairs. David stared at his daughter. She can smell them from here. Enhanced senses are part of her heritage, Zara replied, quickly gathering their few belongings. Along with accelerated development, psychic sensitivity, and unfortunately, a target painted on her back from the moment she was born. This is insane, David muttered, running his hands through his hair. Yesterday my biggest problem was whether to order Chinese or pizza for dinner. Today I find out I'm married to an intergalactic fugitive with a hybrid daughter who can apparently smell danger from 3 floors away. Papa, Lydia interrupted seriously, you should probably put on shoes. The sneaky quiet footsteps are almost to our floor, and Mama gets very fast when people try to hurt us. David looked down at his fuzzy slippers and realized his daughter was absolutely right. He quickly grabbed his sneakers while Zara continued her security assessment. The fire escape? David suggested. They'll have it covered, Zara replied. These aren't amateur hunters. They've been tracking me across 7 star systems for 5 years. 7 star systems? Zara, how did our relationship become a galactic incident? Because I was an idiot who thought love could conquer ancient prejudices and political machinations spanning millennia, Zara said bitterly. And because I was too selfish to walk away from you when I should have. Lydia tugged on David's shirt. Mama doesn't really think she's an idiot, Papa. She told Uncle Dante that falling in love with you was the smartest thing she ever did, even if it made everything complicated. Lydia, Zara warned, though her tone was more embarrassed than angry. What? You did say that. Right after you beat up those mean vampires on Rigel Prime who said humans were just food with feelings. David processed this information while tying his sneakers. You beat up vampires who insulted humans? Several times, Lydia replied proudly. Mama is very good at the fighting thing. She also learned to make pancakes, but she's not as good at that. Focus, Zara said sharply, though David caught the slight smile tugging at her lips. We need an exit strategy. David, is there another way out of this building that doesn't involve the main exits? David's years of investigative journalism suddenly proved useful in unexpected ways. The basement connects to the old underground mall system. Most of it's been sealed off, but I know a way through from when I was researching that story about Seattle's forgotten spaces. Perfect. Can you guide us? Yeah, but Zara, what exactly is the long-term plan here? Keep running forever. Because I have to tell you, my stamina isn't quite up to intergalactic fugitive standards. Zara's expression softened, and for a moment, she looked less like a supernatural warrior and more like the woman he'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. I don't know. For 5 years, the plan was just to keep Lydia safe and hope the Covenant would eventually lose interest. But they haven't, and now they know about you. About me? You're not just collateral damage anymore, David. By staying in contact with me, by accepting Lydia as your daughter, you become part of this whether we like it or not. A soft knock came at the door, too polite and measured to be from neighbors or delivery drivers. Mr. Park. The voice was cultured, with an accent David couldn't place. We know you're home. We simply wish to talk. Lydia wrinkled her nose. That one smells like old blood and lies, Papa. How can you tell someone smells like lies? David whispered. Lies have a sour metal smell, Lydia explained matter-of-factly. And that person has told many lies recently. Zara was already moving toward the back of the apartment. Basement. Now. They made their way through David's small kitchen toward the service door that led to the building's lower levels. David grabbed his laptop bag and wallet out of pure journalist instinct. His life might be imploding, but he wasn't about to lose 5 years of research files to supernatural home invasion. Mr. Park, the voice continued from the hallway, now sounding less patient, we really must insist. Your wife has something that belongs to our people. I'm not property. Lydia said indignantly, though she kept her voice to a whisper. No, little star, you're not, Zara assured her. You're the future, which is exactly why they're afraid of you. They reached the basement level, which smelled of dust, forgotten storage units, and the peculiar mustiness that seemed to inhabit all building basements everywhere. David led them through a maze of utility pipes and storage areas toward an old maintenance door he'd discovered during his urban exploration phase. This connects to the old underground shopping complex, David explained, producing a small flashlight from his jacket pocket. Most people don't know it exists anymore. Papa comes prepared, Lydia observed approvingly. Years of investigating stories in weird places teaches you to carry emergency supplies, David replied, feeling oddly proud that his paranoid journalist habits were finally proving useful. They emerged into a dimly lit tunnel that stretched away into darkness in both directions. The walls were lined with the remnants of what had once been storefronts, now empty and echoing with their footsteps. This is actually kind of cool, David admitted, his curiosity momentarily overriding his terror. I always wondered what this place looked like when it was operational. Focus, David, Zara said, though he caught her looking around with interest too. Which way? Left leads to the old food court and eventually connects to the transit tunnel system. Right leads to, actually, I'm not sure. I never explored that far. Left, then. Stay close and stay quiet. As they walked through the abandoned underground mall, Lydia skipped alongside them with the resilient adaptability that seemed to be a hybrid trait. Mama, when we find somewhere safe, can Papa tell me more stories about Earth? You said he knows lots of stories. If Papa wants to, Zara replied carefully. David looked at his daughter, and wasn't that still a mind-bending concept, and felt something settle into place in his chest. I'd like that. I know stories about everything from ancient civilizations to space exploration. Though I guess you've already seen the space exploration part firsthand. Different kinds of space, Lydia explained seriously. Mama showed me the pretty parts. But I want to hear about Earth space, where humans first learned to reach for stars. That's a beautiful way to put it, David said, struck by his daughter's poetic perspective. She gets that from you, Zara said softly. The way you see wonder in ordinary things and find poetry in facts. They continued through the tunnel system, following David's half-remembered mental map of Seattle's hidden spaces. The sound of their footsteps echoed strangely in the empty corridors, creating an odd rhythm that almost sounded like music. Mama, Lydia said after they'd walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, Papa smells happy sad. Is that normal for humans? Very normal, Zara replied. Humans are good at feeling multiple emotions simultaneously. It's one of their most remarkable traits. I feel happy sad too, Lydia admitted. Happy because Papa is nice and smells like home, but sad because we might have to leave again. David stopped walking and knelt down to Lydia's eye level. Hey. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I want you to know something. You're my daughter, which means you're the most important person in my universe. Whatever we have to do to keep you safe, that's what we'll do. Lydia studied his face with those unsettling crimson eyes. Even if it means leaving Earth? Even then, David replied, surprising himself with how certain he sounded. Though I'm really hoping we can find another solution. We're going to, Lydia said with absolute confidence. Because Mama is very smart and Papa is very creative, and together you'll figure out how to make the bad vampires stop being scared of hybrid families. David looked up at Zara, who was watching their exchange with an expression of wonder and hope. She's pretty optimistic for someone who's been running from intergalactic death squads her entire life. Hybrid children seem to inherit the best traits from both species, Zara explained. Human resilience and hope, combined with sanguinary determination and strength. Plus extra good hearing, Lydia added helpfully. Which is why I can tell you that the tunnel walkers are following us now, but they're not being very sneaky about it. David and Zara froze, listening intently. Sure enough, the sound of multiple footsteps echoed from somewhere behind them in the darkness. How many? Zara asked. 3, Lydia replied confidently. And they smell frustrated, which means they're not very good at the sneaky hunting thing. That's, actually encouraging, David said. Don't get overconfident, Zara warned. Even amateur Covenant hunters are extremely dangerous. But their frustration means they're not familiar with human urban environments. Then we have an advantage, David realized. This is my city. I know places they'll never think to look. David led them through increasingly narrow maintenance tunnels, following a route he'd mapped during a particularly ambitious article about Seattle's hidden infrastructure. The sound of pursuit had grown closer, but Zara seemed confident in his navigation skills, or at least, she trusted him enough not to question his zigzag path through the underground maze. There, David whispered, pointing to a heavy steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. This connects to the Pike Place Market's lower storage levels. If we can reach the main market, we'll be in public with lots of witnesses. Witnesses won't stop Covenant hunters, Zara warned, but she helped him force open the rusted door anyway. They consider human casualties acceptable losses in pursuit of their goals. Then we need to make sure there are no casualties, David replied with more confidence than he felt. They emerged into the familiar chaos of Pike Place Market service areas, where vendors stored supplies and prepared for the next day's business. The normal sounds of late-night market activity, rolling carts, muffled conversations, industrial refrigeration units, provided perfect cover for their movement. Lydia immediately perked up at the sensory overload. Papa, this place smells like fish and flowers and happy people and old stories. That's Pike Place Market, David explained, guiding them toward the main tourist areas. It's been here for over 100 years. Lots of stories happened in this place. I like it, Lydia declared. It feels alive in a different way than the Star Gardens. As they moved through the market's maze of stalls and corridors, David's journalist instincts kicked into high gear. He began noticing details that had never seemed relevant before. Security camera positions, exit routes, potential weapons among the vendor supplies, and most importantly, the growing crowd of late-night tourists and workers who could provide both cover and complications. Mama, Lydia said suddenly, tugging on Zara's coat, the mean-smelling people are getting closer. And there's something else. Something that feels. She paused, her small face creased with concentration. Wrong. Like the air is too thick. Zara's expression grew grim. They're using enhancement fields. Covenant technology that amplifies sanguinary abilities in exchange for shortened operational time. Translation for the human. They're burning through their life energy to become faster and stronger, but they can only maintain it for short periods, Zara explained. It means they're desperate to end this quickly. Great. Desperate supernatural assassins with temporary superpowers. That's definitely not terrifying. A crash echoed from somewhere behind them, followed by what sounded like splintering wood and possibly some very creative cursing in a language David didn't recognize. They're not used to human architecture, Lydia observed with the clinical detachment of someone far too young to be analyzing tactical situations. Uncle Dante always said that unfamiliarity with local environments was the biggest weakness of overconfident hunters. Your Uncle Dante sounds like a smart guy, David said. He is. He taught me how to play poker and how to identify 17 different types of combat stances. He said both skills would be useful for hybrid children. 17 different, never mind. I don't want to know why a 4-year-old needs to identify combat stances. They reached the main market floor, where even at nearly 11 p.m., tourists and locals moved through the iconic fish-throwing stalls and flower vendors. David felt a moment of surreal displacement. Here he was, fleeing supernatural assassins through one of Seattle's most beloved tourist attractions with his alien vampire wife and psychic hybrid daughter. This is either the most ridiculous situation I've ever been in, or the most romantic, David muttered. Why not both? Zara replied, and he caught the ghost of her old humor in the comment. Because romance usually doesn't involve people trying to murder our daughter for existing. Papa, Lydia interrupted, in the stories Mama told me about you, you always found ways to help people when bad things happened. The article about the missing children, and the one about the people who needed homes after the big storm. David looked down at his daughter, struck by her faith in abilities he wasn't sure he possessed. Those were just news stories, sweetheart. I'm not really a hero. Mama says heroes are just people who help when they could run away instead, Lydia replied seriously. And you're not running away. Before David could respond to this observation, the lights in the market flickered, and a wave of unnatural cold swept through the area. Several tourists looked around in confusion, while vendors began closing their stalls with the practiced efficiency of people who recognized unusual weather patterns. Enhancement field activation, Zara said grimly. They're close. How close? 3 figures emerged from the service corridor they'd recently exited, moving with fluid precision that immediately marked them as non-human to anyone paying attention. Fortunately, most people weren't paying attention, too focused on their own late-night market experiences to notice the supernatural predators now stalking through the crowd. The lead figure was tall and pale, with the distinctive crimson eyes of the sanguinari but none of Zara's warmth or humanity. His companions flanked him with military precision, scanning the crowd with predatory focus. Kazeth, Zara breathed, her voice carrying a mixture of recognition and dread. Ex-boyfriend? David asked, then immediately regretted the question. Former hunting partner. Before I met you, before I understood that there were alternatives to the Covenant's methods. Zara's tone was flat, professional. He took my defection personally. Great. Scorned supernatural X with a grudge and government authorization to commit murder. This day just keeps getting better. Lydia tugged on both their hands. We need to move. The angry one is using his nose sense to track Mama's scent trail. They moved deeper into the market, using the crowd and the maze-like layout to their advantage. David found himself thinking like an investigative journalist again. How would he research this situation? What questions would he ask? What sources would he cultivate? Zara, he said quietly as they ducked behind a flower stall, what do they actually want? I mean, beyond the obvious, kill the hybrid child part. What's the political angle here? Hybrid children represent evolutionary change, Zara explained, keeping her voice low while scanning for threats. If we can successfully reproduce with humans, it proves that sanguinari aren't the separate species the Covenant claims we are. It threatens their entire power structure. So Lydia is living proof that their ideology is wrong. Exactly. Which makes her more dangerous to them than any weapon. David felt a strange sense of professional excitement despite their circumstances. This is a story. A huge story. Intergalactic politics, racial purity movements, evolutionary biology, this could expose the entire covenant structure. Papa, Lydia said urgently, the angry one is talking to his friends. They're going to try to make all the humans go away so they can fight Mama without witnesses. Can they do that? Sanguinari can project psychic influence over short distances, Zara confirmed. Not mind control, but strong suggestion. They'll probably trigger a panic that clears the area. Unless someone counteracts their influence, David mused, pulling out his phone. Lydia, you said you have psychic abilities too, right? Some, Lydia admitted. I can feel emotions and sometimes help people feel calmer. What if we broadcast this live? Social media, news outlets, emergency services, make it impossible for them to operate in secret? Zara stared at him. You want to reveal the existence of Sanguinari to your entire planet? I want to make sure they can't hurt our daughter, David replied firmly. And honestly, after tonight, I think the secret's pretty much blown anyway. Before Zara could respond, David led them through increasingly narrow maintenance tunnels, following a route he'd mapped during a particularly ambitious article about Seattle's hidden infrastructure. The sound of pursuit had grown closer, but Zara seemed confident in his navigation skills, or at least, she trusted him enough not to question his zigzag path through the underground maze. There, David whispered, pointing to a heavy steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. This connects to the Pike Place Market's lower storage levels. If we can reach the main market, we'll be in public with lots of witnesses. Witnesses won't stop Covenant hunters, Zara warned, but she helped him force open the rusted door anyway. They consider human casualties acceptable losses in pursuit of their goals. Then we need to make sure there are no casualties, David replied with more confidence than he felt. They emerged into the familiar chaos of Pike Place Market service areas, where vendors stored supplies and prepared for the next day's business. The normal sounds of late-night market activity, rolling carts, muffled conversations, industrial refrigeration units, provided perfect cover for their movement. Lydia immediately perked up at the sensory overload. Papa, this place smells like fish and flowers and happy people and old stories. That's Pike Place Market, David explained, guiding them toward the main tourist areas. It's been here for over 100 years. Lots of stories happened in this place. I like it, Lydia declared. It feels alive in a different way than the Star Gardens. As they moved through the market's maze of stalls and corridors, David's journalist instincts kicked into high gear. He began noticing details that had never seemed relevant before. Security camera positions, exit routes, potential weapons among the vendor supplies, and most importantly, the growing crowd of late-night tourists and workers who could provide both cover and complications. Mama, Lydia said suddenly, tugging on Zara's coat, the mean-smelling people are getting closer. And there's something else. Something that feels. She paused, her small face creased with concentration. Wrong. Like the air is too thick. Zara's expression grew grim. They're using enhancement fields. Covenant technology that amplifies sanguinary abilities in exchange for shortened operational time. Translation for the human. They're burning through their life energy to become faster and stronger, but they can only maintain it for short periods, Zara. My name is David Park, and behind me are my wife Zara and my daughter Lydia, David continued, keeping his phone steady despite his racing heart. Zara belongs to an alien species called the Sanguinari. Yes, vampires are real, and no, they don't sparkle. Lydia is what you might call a hybrid, and right now, 3 individuals are hunting her through this market because they believe children like her shouldn't exist. The viewer count on his live stream was climbing rapidly as people shared the feed across social media platforms. Comments flooded the screen, everything from fake, to OMG is this real, to someone call the police. Papa, Lydia whispered, there are a lot of people watching us now. I can feel their emotions through the picture box. That's the idea, sweetheart. The more people who see this, the harder it becomes for bad people to do bad things in secret. Kazeth and his hunters had noticed the phone and were approaching with increased urgency. The lead hunter's enhanced senses would have easily detected the electromagnetic signature of live broadcasting, and his expression suggested he was not pleased with this development. "Zara of the fallen stars," Kazeth called out, his voice carrying across the nearly empty market with unnatural resonance. "You have violated the covenant of separation and produced an abomination that threatens the purity of our species. Surrender the hybrid, and your human may live." "Counteroffer," Zara replied, moving to put herself between Kazeth and her family. "You leave my daughter alone, return to whatever backwards corner of the galaxy spawned your bigotry, and maybe I won't demonstrate exactly why the Covenant's leadership used to send me to handle their most dangerous problems." David angled his phone to capture both sides of the confrontation while maintaining his commentary. For those just joining us, we're witnessing what appears to be a diplomatic breakdown between members of an advanced alien species. The three individuals approaching us have been pursuing my family across multiple star systems because they object to interspecies relationships. "David," his editor's voice came through his earpiece, "are you absolutely certain this isn't some kind of elaborate hoax? Because we've got news outlets around the world picking up your feed." "Watch and learn, Sarah," David replied, not taking his eyes off the approaching hunters. Kazeth raised his hand, and the air around it began to shimmer with dark energy. "The time for negotiation has passed. The hybrid will be eliminated, as will any humans who have been contaminated by extended exposure to sanguinary influence." "Mama," Lydia said quietly, "should I do the thing you taught me for emergencies?" "Not yet, little star. Let Papa show the world what we're dealing with first." Kazeth launched himself forward with supernatural speed, moving faster than human eyes could track. But Zara was ready, meeting his attack with fluid grace that spoke of centuries of combat experience. They collided in the center of the market with an impact that shattered nearby windows and sent several abandoned vendor carts flying. "Holy!" David breathed, struggling to keep his phone steady as his wife fought an enhanced alien assassin with her bare hands. "Okay, for anyone still thinking this might be special effects, I can guarantee that's real superhuman combat happening right in front of me." The other two hunters moved to flank Zara, but she was already adapting to multiple opponents, using the market's layout to her advantage. She grabbed a heavy steel serving tray from one of the food stalls and wielded it like a shield, deflecting energy blasts while maintaining constant motion. "Papa," Lydia said, her small face creased with concentration, "I'm going to try something." The watching people feel scared and confused, but also curious. "I think I can help them understand." "Understand what?" "That Mama is protecting us, not hurting anyone. That love makes people braver, not more dangerous." Before David could ask what she meant, Lydia placed her small hand on his phone. Immediately, the comments section began changing. The aggressive skepticism and fear transformed into expressions of awe and support. "She's protecting them. Look how she's avoiding the bystanders. The little girl is so brave. This is incredible." David realized that Lydia was somehow projecting emotional clarity through the live stream, helping viewers see past their initial shock to understand the deeper story. It was like the world's first psychic journalism. Meanwhile, Zara had gained the upper hand against Kazeth, using his overconfidence and unfamiliarity with human urban environments against him. She led him on a chase through the market's upper levels, where his enhanced strength became a liability as he crashed through structural supports he didn't recognize as important. "The hybrid's abilities are already manifesting," Kazeth snarled as he extricated himself from a collapsed fish stall. "She's contaminating human minds through their primitive communication networks." "She's 4 years old," David shot back, his journalist instincts now fully engaged. "She's not contaminating anyone, she's helping people understand that fear and hatred aren't the only responses to things that are different. Your species lacks the wisdom to coexist with superior beings," one of the other hunters declared, raising his hand to generate another energy blast. "Superior?" David laughed, though he kept his phone recording steadily. You're losing a fight to one person in a fish market because you're too arrogant to understand basic architecture. That doesn't seem particularly superior to me. The viewer count had now reached 6 figures, with major news networks beginning to pick up the feed. David could see CNN, BBC, and others starting to broadcast his live stream with breaking news banners. "Mama's winning," Lydia observed with satisfaction. "The angry one is getting frustrated because his friends aren't as good at fighting as he expected." Indeed, Zara had systematically disabled 2 of the 3 hunters, using non-lethal techniques that demonstrated both her skill and her restraint. Kazeth was beginning to show signs of fatigue as his enhancement field consumed more of his life energy. "Zara," David called out, "you've got about 50,000 people watching this fight. Want to tell them why you're really here?" Zara paused in her systematic dismantling of Covenant hunting tactics to address the camera directly. "My name is Zara Starweaver. 5 years ago, I fell in love with a human man and discovered that love doesn't recognize species boundaries. We had a daughter who represents the future of peaceful coexistence between our peoples. There are those who would rather commit genocide than accept that future. And what do you say to people who might be afraid of aliens living among humans?" David prompted, recognizing a perfect interview opportunity even in the middle of supernatural combat. "I say that I've spent 5 years protecting not just my family, but every human on this planet from those who would harm you simply for existing in proximity to us," Zara replied, effortlessly dodging another of Kazetha's increasingly desperate attacks. "Fear is natural when faced with the unknown. But hatred is a choice." Kazeth, apparently realizing that public opinion was turning decisively against him, made one final desperate gambit. Instead of attacking Zara, he turned toward David and Lydia, gathering the last of his enhancement field energy for a killing strike. "If the hybrid cannot be taken, then it must be eliminated along with its human contamination," he snarled. But Lydia was ready. The small girl stepped forward, still holding Mr. Flame, and something extraordinary happened. Every person watching the live stream, now numbering in the millions globally, felt a sudden wave of calm understanding wash over them. Through Lydia's psychic projection, they experienced exactly what she was, a child who had never known anything but love and acceptance, who saw beauty in diversity and strength in cooperation. The emotional resonance was so powerful that Kazeth himself staggered, his attack faltering as he was forced to confront the reality of what he was trying to destroy. "I'm not an abomination," Lydia said clearly, her young voice carrying impossible authority. "I'm just different. And different isn't dangerous unless you choose to make it dangerous." Kazetha's enhancement field collapsed entirely, leaving him exhausted and facing a hostile crowd of humans who now understood exactly what kind of future he represented versus what kind of future Lydia represented. "The Covenant will not accept this outcome," he said weakly. "The Covenant will have to," Zara replied firmly. "Because as of tonight, they're no longer operating in secret. The entire galaxy is watching." Indeed, David's live stream had been picked up by news networks across Earth, and through those networks, by various interstellar communication relays. The story was spreading beyond Earth at light speed, carried by the same networks that had allowed the Covenant to operate in shadowy secrecy for millennia. "Papa," Lydia said, tugging on David's shirt, "the watching people want to know if we're going to be okay now." David looked at his phone's camera, then at his wife and daughter, then at the defeated Covenant hunters being surrounded by increasingly curious Seattle police officers who were definitely not prepared for supernatural arrest procedures. "You know what?" David said to his global audience, "I think we're going to be just fine. Because it turns out that when you shine a light on hatred and fear, they lose most of their power. And when you show the world that love can bridge any gap, even the gap between species, amazing things become possible." 6 months later, David stood in a newly established Human Sanguinari Cultural Exchange Center in downtown Seattle, watching Lydia play with a group of other hybrid children who had emerged from hiding following what the media had dubbed the Pike Place revelation. His wife worked nearby, coordinating with both human governments and the reformed Sanguinari Council to establish protocols for peaceful coexistence. "Any regrets about becoming the most famous journalist in galactic history?" Zara asked, joining him at the observation window. Only one, David replied, pulling her close. I really wish you trusted me with the truth from the beginning. 5 years is a long time to spend thinking the person you love most is dead. I was protecting you. I know. But next time we face intergalactic political crises, maybe we could try facing them together from the start. Lydia ran over to them, her face bright with excitement. Mama. Papa. Aunt Serafina says the council wants to establish a permanent embassy on Earth, and they want you to be the first official ambassadors. Isn't that wonderful? David looked at his family, his brilliant, psychic daughter who was already helping design curriculum for hybrid education programs, and his extraordinary wife who had transformed from fugitive to interspecies diplomat, and felt a sense of completion he hadn't experienced in years. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, lifting Lydia into his arms. That sounds pretty wonderful. Does this mean we get to stay on Earth forever? As long as you want to, Zara assured her. Though there are some beautiful worlds I'd love to show you both when you're ready. Can we take Mr. Flame? Mr. Flame goes wherever you go, little star. David watched the sunset through the center's windows, painting the Seattle skyline in shades of gold and crimson that reminded him of his wife's eyes. Sometimes, he reflected, the best stories were the ones where you didn't just report on the news, you became part of it. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you discovered that love really could change the universe.